the black, yellow and red of Belgian national road race champion. Very distinct, easily identifiable from the air. But yeah, just a little bit of positioning play here. Quite a wide road, but as you can see, well, that looks like the American now starting to struggle. Gage Hecht, 24 years of age, just cannot keep up with the pace here. There's been no rapid acceleration from the group. It's just that at some point, and he looked to be grimacing a little bit earlier on, didn't he? Looked to be suffering just a bit, but it's just that slow, incremental ebbing away of energy. There comes a point where you just cannot hold on any longer. As we see the peloton split into two distinct halves, navigating this road furniture as they head onto the outskirts, and the gap coming down quite a bit. I mean, primarily due to the momentum of the peloton for this positioning.
Yeah, it's obviously a key point in the race for the peloton. Every lap we've seen them really position themselves at the front here, making sure they can get their riders who they're hoping to get to the front and take the win right up there into these final few kilometres of the circuit. It's an interesting one. You don't often see a breakaway deplete so quickly in a race. No. That's 3 riders now who've been dropped in the space of a lap, actually. So I think someone is really driving the pace on, and someone is on a good day. I'm not quite sure who it is. From the TV pictures, I'm guessing it's Vinebo from Rual cycling team.
It looks like it, yeah.
The Danish rider. He just seems to be churning a big gear and looking quite comfortable. Obviously on a good day, and he's trying to keep the pace going and see if he can stay away to the end. And fair play to him. Great to see such a ride taking place. But if you are a rider like Hecht and you find yourself with a Vinebo on a day like this, it can be tough going.
Yeah, Gage Hecht, born in New Orleans, won a stage a few years back at the Colorado Classic. Certainly got reasonable legs to have got in that breakaway, but cannot hold on much longer. And as you say, it is quite unusual. You often see one rider getting dropped or the brake splitting because of attacks, but I think just because of these weather conditions and the difficult nature of the terrain today, riders are, rather than just exploding, they're just fading away. They're not suddenly a lot worse than they were. It's just that the energy is slowly but surely just being reduced, and there comes a point where you just cannot hold any longer. It's a very graduated thing. It's not extreme at all, is it? It's very difficult to actually try and get that across, that these weather conditions means that you fade away in a completely different way than you would elsewhere. I think it's quite unique.
Yeah, it can be quite a brutal experience to deal with as well, because you almost wonder why you're getting dropped. It's almost more of a mental thing, because your body just slowly gets to that point and you just can't hang on. You just can't deal with it anymore, and it is just the cold getting into you. It's tough going, and it is on when you hit these little ramps, you just have that little bit more of an acceleration of pace that you notice it. And suddenly there's nothing you can do about it. You find yourself going backwards. And if you are with a rider who's on a really good day and who is starting to up the pace, inside 50k to go now, so now is the time, if you want to try and stay away in the breakaway, to really up things. If you're struggling and you feel that, yeah, it's a hard one.
It certainly is. Well, there we go, 47k's to go. 2 more laps here at the Famenne Ardenne Classic. And the peloton still being led by Lotto Soudal. Just sat in the wheel there, Taco van der Hoorn, Victor Kampenaerts there, third, Vliegen at the head of affairs there as well in 4th wheel. Just saw Connor Swift. A little bit harder to identify the riders when they're completely covered like this. But certainly a few riders just suffering towards the back. But still 2 minutes and 2 seconds for the riders that remain out in front. And there they are. We've got Tim Marsman of the Metec Solowatt team. He's the rider on the front at the moment in that black kit. The rider who's riding very impressively in 2nd wheel at the moment is the British rider Mark Stewart from the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro Cycling team. And also in the mix, I think Connor's correctly identified as perhaps being the strongest at the moment, doing some really long, effective, strong pulls on the front, is Emil Melke Vinbo, 28 years of age, from the Rio cycling team. There he is in the orange. by our break today.
Yeah, I think this trio of riders are feeling good and they're just looking to push on now and enjoy the remainder of this race. I don't think the peloton will be panicking too much. 46 kilometres, it's quite a long way to go, especially in these conditions and with a few more ascents of the main climb on this circuit to come. But still, they won't want to let it, stay out there too much longer. They'd like to see that gap coming down rather than going up. And it'll be interesting to see how the likes of Innivo cope with the next few ascents, because they have been riding strongly, and if they do still have the legs to push on, then it could start to get into dangerous territory. But I think for the moment, Peloton will be happy with the situation.
Yeah, especially with only being 3 riders out in front. So it looks like we've got Alpecin and Phoenix have now joined the chase. It's the first time they've actually joined in. I imagine they do want to start bringing this gap down now as well, but I don't think they'll be super minded about the break. It's just about keeping this momentum on and making this race as hard as possible. And just look at the body language of these riders here. Campanart's excluded, who's solid as a rock, but everybody else swaying from side to side. But Campanart's completely locked and loaded in that familiar position of his. So that's Cage Hecht. Looks like he's it's one of the riders, should I say, of the American human-powered health team. It might have actually been Hecht who's been caught and passed. So this is the same as we saw on the previous lap. As soon as the road goes up any of these significant climbs, riders are being detached in all sorts of difficulties. But the pace really being turned on at the front now by Alpecin de Koning. Remember, they have Dries de Bont, Tim Merlier, Sylvain Dillier, and Janine Mirsch as well. He is a classy rider. They were, I would imagine, would be the protected riders, and they're certainly making it difficult at the front now. So things slowly but surely starting to hot up now, Connor.
I think it was actually Dries de Bont as well who put that little acceleration in for Alpecin de Koning. You can just see him there in 740. Kind of got the Belgian champion bands on the biceps there. Makes him slightly more distinguishable, but serious rider who can challenge today. Interesting to see him being put to work so early. Potentially it was a slight acceleration or potentially an attack by him there, just to see if any riders were keen on mixing things up at this stage of the race. But yeah, you can see the pressure that's caused at the back there. Plenty of riders going into difficulties from that small acceleration. Sepp van Mark.
Sepp van Mark looking good there in the white and blue of the Israel Premier Tech team. Now, is this an attack of... Now, this looks like... trying to think of Taco van der Hoorn. So, no, he did some big pulls on the front, but Taco van der Hoorn, being Taco van der Hoorn, certainly won't raise the white flag just yet. If there's anything he can do, he will try and get back in contact and dragging yourself back. But I tell you what, once you've done some turns on the front and you've been pulling for quite a while, you hit a climb, it's very, very difficult to make that a little bit of adjustment, isn't it? It really does take its toll. But if there's any chance in doing just a little bit more for the team, he will, because he is, as we said before, an exceptionally tenacious rider who can go very, very deep indeed. I don't know if you watched it this year. I was with the pleasure of commentating on the Brussels Cycling Classic back in June, where he took that win from the breakaway. But that final last kilometre was one of the best last kilometres I've seen in a bike race for a very, very long time. But he is one of those riders that can go quite deep. It was literally a grovel up the finishing straight. If you've got a chance to re-watch it, Connor, I would if I were you.
Yeah, I remember finding myself in the breakaway with him on occasion, and he just used to churn this gear and be so still on the bike, and he just loved, I think, being out front and kind of putting the challenge to the peloton and see if he could stay away, because you do always find him in those breakaway situations, and it's worked quite well for him as well. He's been picking up some nice results from that sort of scenario. He's done a good job today. I think his day might be done now. There are potential places to get back in there and get back to the front. Lotte Soudal, though, with strength in numbers at the front here, really taking this race and controlling it.
Yeah, they certainly are, as you said. The first 6 riders. One of the riders has been dropped. That was Sebastian Grignard, but he did a lot of the work earlier on, so not surprising that the 23-year-old has now been left. But Arnaud Delis, Victor Campanart, Cedric Bullens, Jesper de Buys has been doing a lot of work recently. Florian Vermeersch and Brent Van Moor are the riders occupying the first 6 places in the peloton. And since we've come on air now, this is the lowest the gap has been, at 1 minute and 33 seconds for our break. It was once 6 riders strong, and it has now been reduced to just 6. And you're looking at the figure of Mark Stewart on the front. Rider we haven't had the opportunity to talk too much about, but has had a very good year. Won the overall in the New Zealand Cycling Classic as well as a stage. And then he took 3rd overall in the Tour of Hellas, the Tour of Greece. Actually, I was 3rd overall in the Tour of Greece back in 1998. One of my only podiums in a big race like that. And then recently won in Romania the Tour of Romania. So he's had a very, very good year so far. So a conversation I can't exactly discern. I can't lip read from that distance, I'm afraid. Just giving him a little bit of encouragement there by the sounds of things, telling him what the gap is and just telling him that he's looking good, because he's clearly looking pretty strong here. And clearly looking at that stage win in the New Zealand Cycle Classic that he had. That was earlier in the year, very early in the year. Put away the likes of George Bennett on a very, very hilly stage. So he's very capable on these climbs, and it's looking still very strong.
Yeah, definitely. Just as they start the lower slopes of the Côte d'Ivoire. I think he's a rider who he's done some classy rides, and he's intelligent too. So if he has managed to save that bit of energy in the breakaway and can use it up in these last 40 kilometres, it'd be great to see him, be prominent in the attack and in the closing stages. I believe he found himself in New Zealand in 2019 when the COVID lockdown hit.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he found himself kind of stuck out in New Zealand as all the travel restrictions came into effect, and I was reading it gave him a bit of a time to, fall back in love with cycling in a way. He lost touch with the British cycling programme. I think he was on their kind of under-20 team, and then he stuck out in New Zealand. He kind of found this new love of cycling. He's kind of gone from strength to strength since then. He's now on Bolton Equity's Black Spoke, and he's been riding really strongly this year. So fair play to him.
Yeah, given his results, you'd imagine that there might be a couple of pro teams actually looking at him, but I'm not too sure what his options are for next year. No information about the team that is going to be riding for next year, but certainly put himself in the shop window and continuing to do so with rides like this. As the peloton just take this little right-hander at the bottom of the climb, there's that little sign denoting it is the start of the King of the Mountains. And this ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire will be the last time that points are awarded at the top, although I don't think that is at the top of these riders' minds. It's just trying to stay away for as long as they can. Stewart just on the back there, looking good. Marsman is the rider on your screen right now, the Dutchman, and then Vinbo just on the front there from Denmark, 28 years of age, of the Rual cycling team. And that peloton is a little bit smaller now. We had 129 starters today, a few hours ago now, in Famenne, Marche en Famenne, should I say. But I do think this peloton, especially over these last couple of laps, as things start to warm up a little bit more, will start to fracture a little bit. Difficult to call this one, whether we're going to see a big group sprint or whether we're going to see a small group go away, or even a solo rider. Certainly difficult to tell. And we've got a nice mix of riders. I mean, when you look at the parkour, the weather conditions, Connor, and the composition of the teams here and the sorts of riders within those teams, we could actually have, it wouldn't surprise me that we had any one of those scenarios. It's certainly not a nailed-on sprint or a break day. It's a difficult one to call, isn't it?
It is a difficult one to call. I think it all comes down to Lotto Soudal and how well they control this race, how well they manage to spare their riders now.
So the peloton, for the 4th time today, climbing the the 3rd time today, climbing the Côte d'Ivoire. One more ascent of this climb, and we've got an attack. The rider just, as we pan back to our breakaway, the remnants of our breakaway, only 3 riders strong now. There was a little counter-attack that came just from the front of the peloton. The gap now 1 minute and 37 seconds. It's a long old drag, this one. Just under 5% gradient, but 2.3 kilometres long. It is still Mark Stewart doing his job on the front. Sits quite low forward on the saddle, but looks very effective. It is I do remember reading that story, actually. I completely forgotten, but a quite remarkable story. But a very talented bike rider indeed. And they've got some options back in the bunch as well. I mean, they've got Stewart in the break, but they've got Aaron Gate, we believe, is still back in the peloton, and James Oram as well. So they've got a really decent team, haven't they? And what a season Aaron Gate has had. Commonwealth Games champion, but has won across the board on the track, but is a track champion too, and then has won quite a lot of races on the continent, so he's a real talent.
Yeah, definitely. He's an old teammate of mine, actually, on various occasions. So, yeah, it's great to see him really far in this year and getting some brilliant results. Cracking winning the Commonwealth Games to win that one. It was cool to see, and then he just seemed to be on fire for the rest of the Commonwealth Games, actually, just winning everything he started. So, tough rider too, so tough. I think today he'll be enjoying it. I think if he can look after himself in the bunch and be there in whatever sort of group gets to the finish, he'll be a serious contender in the sprint. It'd be interesting to pan back to the peloton now and see how those attacks are playing out, because I thought it was a rider from Israel Premier Tech potentially starting this acceleration. So we see Intermarché go on the attack, countering that move.
Yep, another rider from Trek Segafredo. They've got Ed Turns, Jacob Elcombe, Tony Galopin, Danul, Tom Scoins, Otto Vergada and Alex Kirsch from Luxembourg. That's their lineup. And interestingly, just moving up the outside, the first we've seen of the Total Energies team. They've only got a small team of 5 riders here. Valentin Ferrand had a great win early this year. Daniel Oss, the faithful lieutenant, a good classics rider, of course, Daniel Oss, and a faithful lieutenant and good friend of Peter Sagan. Then we've got Nicky Terpstra riding one of his last races as a professional. Dries van Gestel and Anthony Tergis. Actually, that's a pretty decent team. Ferrand, Oss, Terpstra, van Gestel and Tergis. That's a strong squad for the French team. They've had a solid year this year. Peter Sagan, good ride in the World Championships for him, but it's had so many problems with injuries and catching COVID on a couple of occasions. He's never quite delivered, although he took that win in the Tour of Switzerland. But they've got a pretty decent team here, and they have at least 3 riders moving forward towards the front.
Yeah, I think this is the moment where we're starting to see Lotto Soudal struggling to keep control on the bunch. As these attacks go and some of their riders start to get distanced, we could see much more unpredictable racing. And we've talked about how strongly the brakes been riding. They're inside 40k to go now, and if you do see those attacks go and the control go out of the peloton and the chase behind, that's when the chances of the breakaway staying away really begins to improve. I think you see that kind of disarray behind. No one quite knows whether to work or not, and I think that's what those riders at the front have to do now. They have to keep their heads down, keep on riding hard, and hope that potentially happens behind, so it'll give them a really good chance of staying away. I also noticed Rory Townsend there with Sun God. He was really attentive with a few of those attacks, riding right up there in 4th, 5th wheel, I believe. Dropped back a bit now potentially, but yeah, he's doing a great ride so far, and he could be one to watch as well if this comes down to a sprint. But it looks like Israel Premier Tech are starting to kind of fire those attacks off the front and try and mix things up a bit here in this race.
Yep, there's a couple of big accelerations. A couple of riders went clear, but they were very quickly brought back, as you see the long strung out line just coming over the top now. We're well over the top of the Côte d'Ivoire. It is a long downhill section with a couple of little flatter plateaus, and then the road kicks up again. But we have at least around a 4 or 5k drop off the top of this climb. It's one of the only opportunities to get any real recovery, although as you can see, as the gradient isn't particularly steep, you actually need to keep pedaling on the descent. It's not a descent that you plummet down. It's a gradual gradient, and you'll need to keep pressing on. But there's another launch on the front, or another rider on the front. I think it is the figure of Dries de Bont yet again. As you said, that style of his, and those little stripes on his biceps, as you said. But he's one of those riders, isn't he, Dries de Bont, who is very rarely put to given him a race like this, given the options they've got. You'd imagine he'd have his own free rein, but even when he gets in breaks or there's stuff, he's always happy to be aggressive, isn't he? it's a difficult rider to read. He might be just riding on the front just to make it hard, and that still be minded to try and go for the win. He's quite an interesting proposition, isn't it?
He is, yeah. I found myself in the breakaway with him a few times, actually, on occasion when I was living in Belgium, and we'd be in like Pro Comesses, which are kind of smaller, lesser known races, but still really prestigious. And you do quite a lot of them throughout the season. He just used to like riding hard. He'd get in the break no matter what, and just, if you were on the front with him, he'd be like, right, let's go, let's smash it. And he just used to love that. And even on the races like you see today, and bigger races in pro cycling, it would be the same story really. Just love getting in the break or even attacking and mixing things up. He's not the sort of rider that enjoyed kind of sitting back and playing a patient game. I kind of empathise with that a bit. I used to be the same in a way. It's quite like going on the attack if I could, which was quite rare. But like you see today, he's been quite aggressive and looking to spice things up. And I always thought he was quite a good barometer of a race, because when you start to see him looking to place those moves, you knew it was a good moment to try and be there at the front yourself, and things were about to start getting a bit more serious.
No, definitely. The win just recently, one of the national Belgian races in the Textile Prix Egypt, took that on the 20th, and then again Memorial Fred de Bruin, 5th place. But his biggest win of the year, actually one of the biggest wins of his whole career so for the Belgian Road Championships, was stage 18 in the Giro d'Italia. And you talk about Dries de Bon as being an aggressive rider, an exciting rider, a rider that's slightly unpredictable, but that said, he is very, very intelligent as well. That stage in the Giro that he won, you've got to take your hat off to the whole break on that particular day. Affini, Magnus Cort and David de Bordeaux. That was an absolute masterclass in not just strength, but in the way they tactically rode that stage. And Dries de Bon was at the centre of that. And his post-race interview following the stage was remarkable. It really gave great insight into the intelligence needed. When you have a finite amount of resource, he's one of those riders that really understands the best way to deploy it. If you could find that interview online, I urge you, if you're a fan of the tactical side of our wonderful sport, have a look, because one of the best rides I've seen all year in relation to getting it right tactically.
Really remarkable, isn't it? I mean, when you're going full pelt and you're trying to put your body to such a tough place, but at the same time use your brain to almost play a game of poker and to play your cards when they're needed most. A lot of admiration for riders like Dries, because he's done it time and time again, actually, and despite having really good legs, he's also been really intelligent to put himself in those situations in the first place and read a race so well. That's why I've got quite a lot of respect for him. And if you're seeing him attack now, it's a sure sign that things are about to get pretty spicy.
Indeed. And it's not too far away from the front, but we do have another rider from Total Energies adding a bit of pace to the front of this group. And watch out for Valentin Ferrand. I think he's one of the riders. I think he's the rider just looking round. The young Frenchman, 24 years of age, took a stage of the Dauphiné this year, stage 6 into Gap. A lot of glancing around now. Now this is where the breakaway could profit, but also those saying that there's no one team dominating or controlling things now. It's just natural racing momentum. And the gap for our 3 riders out in front with 33 Ks to go and a bit more, just 59 seconds. So we've got around 8 kilometres until we pass through the finish line and take the bell. That'll mean one more ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. The gap now for our 3 riders out in front is only 58 seconds. And a reminder of who those riders are. Tim Marsman of the Midtech team, number 164 there. In the black kit is there for the Netherlands. Riwal cycling team are represented by Emil Milke Winbo in the orange kit, and also in the mix Mark Stewart of the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro cycling team in the yellow and blue. Meanwhile, the bunch moving along very quickly now as we head ever nearer to Marche and Famenne. Still reasonable size here, but Lotto Soudal have done everything today. They've really controlled this. And there's a few little splits starting to happen there. Now, just stepping back briefly, we've talked a lot about this relegation situation and the attitude of teams. Now, although Lotto they're about 1,000 points adrift, looking like they're going to be relegated. and there's been criticism of the system about the way it's changing the way that teams ride. But I actually think over the last few months, although they might have not amassed a lot of points, the way that Lotto Soudal have gone into the races and taken hold of them and tried stuff, it's been, I think it's been really impressive. I really do. Okay, it looks like they're going to fall foul and drop down, but I really admire the way they've actually ridden the last portion of the season. They have really got stuck in and ridden with a lot of pride, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the way that they've taken on these races, these one-day races in Belgium and Northern France, they've really almost dominated them this season in a way. Arnaud Delis especially, he's been following that up with some fantastic wins himself, proving quite unbeatable when it's come down to a sprint. But like you see today, I mean, the attack's been flying. We've got 32 kilometres to go now, and it looked like the peloton was on a bit of a tough moment there, a bit of disarray, and they've managed to get all their riders back to the front. They've got themselves together again. They're keeping things under control, which is really tough to do in the conditions the way they are as well, especially. So yeah, really admirable racing by Lotto Soudal. And I guess it must be quite tough for a team with this ongoing relegation battle, and we don't know what the final results of that will be until everything's said and done. But if you're on a team which, you know, potentially knows that it's going to be demoted, for morale it must be really hard to kind of pick yourself back up and still race with that sort of aggression, which they are doing today. So yeah, fair play to them.
Yep. They certainly are riding in a determined fashion. And there is the aforementioned Dries de Bont, happy to do the pacemaking on the front. And the way that he's positioned there, and the fact that he's clearly going to be doing some turns on the front, suggests to me, although you never know with de Bont, he probably end up in a breakaway now. It just suggests to me that they want to try and keep this together for Tim Merlier, because although the climb is hard, it's not super steep, and there's no super steep climbs. I mean, we know the Ardenne has got plenty of short steep climbs, but although this circuit is up and down and undulating, there's nothing ferociously steep. Even the longest climb on the circuit is actually, it's pretty gradual, so it might actually suit some of the punchier riders. So it does look as if they are trying to keep this together for the likes of Arnaud Delis and indeed Tim Merlier, and the same can be said for Intermarché, looking after Benjamin Gamay.
I think everyone will be nervous of that final ascent to the Côte d'Ivoire. I think that's where we've seen people get put under pressure. It's quite a small group now in the peloton. There's a lot of riders gone out the back, so it will be slightly easier to position yourself when you find yourself in a group of 40, 50 riders. It's a lot easier to be where you need to be at the front than if you're in a group of 100, 120. So naturally, your job does get a little bit easier if you've survived until this point. But at the same time, you know, your teammates have been doing a good job for a while now, and if they're starting to get tired, you're really going to have to rely on them to bring some of these attacks back, which I think we'll see in this final lap. So for the likes of Tim Merlier and Arnaud Delis, they're going to have to be a little bit aggressive themselves and try and be in the right position too, and not let themselves slip too far back on these remaining climbs.
Yep, that's a really good point. Still, though, it is Lotto Soudal on the front. Alpecin de Koenig just behind, represented by Dries de Bont. Just see on the left-hand side, a couple of riders in that white kit was grey because of these weather conditions. Trek Segafredo. And they've got a couple of good options, say perhaps Ed Turns. It comes down to a sprint, and the gap coming down now dramatically. Only 32 seconds for our three riders out in front. Clearly in plain sight of the peloton on this long, straight section of road. So reduced peloton, but still a sizable number there as we head up this long drag. In fact, it's not the aforementioned Dries de Bont on the front. It's a teammate of his. I think it looks like Alexander Krieger actually on the front now. Peter Campenaerts about 10th place, a little bit further back. Another couple of teams that might want to be disruptive on this final climb. We're looking at AG2R Citroën. Although the likes of like Oliver Narsson and Greg Van Avermaet can sprint, they're not going to want to take the likes of Merlier and Gamay to the finish. And the way they've been floating around, as well as the couple of riders from Total Energies, I think we might see a move from maybe Van Avermaet on the long climb to try and get a little group. As we see the break shell one other rider. Fair play though to Tim Marsman. Two riders now out in front as the gap continues to come down now under the pressure of Alpecin de Koning. Good riding here. This is getting really hard, and then they were two. With quite evenly spread, Connor. We've seen the break lose a rider on this same stretch every single time.
It's been quite remarkable, really. It's like a battle of the strongest between Mark Stewart and Vinnevo. So we'll see who will be the last rider remaining, or potentially they'll share that accolade. But this long drag up to the finish, it must be tough in the peloton here. It's just such a straight road, and yeah, we've seen a rider be shelled from the breakaway each ascent up it now. So it's obviously a really tough section of the race. You drop back down into town after this section into the finish. So obviously a really key point positioning wise. As we come back to the breakaway here, Mark Stewart, he's really pushing on, gap holding at 30 seconds. I think it's going to be hard for them to maintain that to the finish at this stage. But yeah, doing a really admirable job keeping the pace high, and cracking ride by these two riders.
Yep, certainly is. There's been no attacks from this front group. It's just been constant pressure, and that has seen the riders gradually drop away, the first of which was Teggett, and then we saw Zillard go. Then it was Cage Hecht, the American from Human Powered Health, and then Tim Marsman, and now we just have Mark Stewart and Vinbo off the front. He's just about to be called there. One final glance over the shoulder, and he will see the peloton moving very quickly now. 27 seconds now, with 28.5 kilometres still to go. We've got around 4 kilometres, 3.5 Ks until we hit the finish line, and then we will get the bell. A couple of riders just moving up the outside there in the white, as a representative from the with Sun God team as well. They've got a very similar kit actually to the Minerva cycling team. Very, very similar kits, both of those squads. So 28 seconds and holding steady. That long drag there, although we've not seen anybody attack on it, by the fact that the riders from the break have been dropped on this, suggests that deeper into this race, if we don't see any splits on the climb of the Côte d'Ivoire, it's definitely a place where there's options to try and go clear on, or at least try and attack before the finish.
For sure, yeah, because after that drag you come back down into town where it's obviously really technical. You see those real narrow city streets coming towards the finish, and if you can get a good gap there and, you know, potentially escape through the town, then you've got quite a good advantage. That finishing drag, it is quite long as well. It's quite you're going to be hanging out front for a while, but if you have got the legs, it's a perfect place to try and launch an attack, I think.
Yeah, I do think you're right. The only thing that's not in favour of a rider wanting to attack is the fact this particular section is dead straight. A lot of pressure being applied out the front now by Vinbo, just putting Mark Stewart in a little bit of difficulty. Just tell by the way that it slipped forward on the saddle, his arms have gone out a little bit. You see riders, when they're right on the ragged edge, you start to almost like crouch on the bike as you try and recruit different muscle groups to try and get back on the wheel. But Stewart has done so just as they crest the top of that long drag and the road starts to drop, and for a brief couple of moments they can afford a little bit of rest. So if you're just joining us, this is the Famenne Ardenne Classic, the 4th edition of this young race held in the Wallonia area of Belgium. We're actually in and out of Wallonia, but the start and finish is in the Luxembourg province. We've got 2 riders out in front. There was a break of 6 that dominated the day, and now we have just 2, and they have a very slender lead of just 21 seconds, as you can see. And the rider on the front is Mark Stewart of the United Kingdom, riding for the New Zealand squad Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro Cycling Team, and with him for company, riding for the Riwal cycling team, is Emil Vinbo of Denmark. But closing in very, very quickly is the peloton, being led by Lotto Soudal, who've done the vast majority of the pacemaking today. But next time through, they'll get 1 lap, and that means 1 more climb of the Côte d'Ivoire. Will it stay all together, or will there be a breakaway? Difficult to tell right now, but they're about to be caught. They might actually be caught on this finishing straight coming in to the line now. Only 14 seconds now, Connor.
Yeah, every lap we've seen the pinch point through town here, where riders really try and get themselves to the front and position themselves for this kind of finish and straight. I think it's the climb just after the finish line, which is proving quite tricky for the peloton.
Yeah.
So everyone's trying to line themselves up, give themselves potentially some slipping room for this climb. We saw Dries de Bont for Alpecin de Koning put in a little acceleration on the previous lap. So I imagine we might see the same from another rider or the man himself. As Vinabo here pushes on through town, he really is on a cracking day. He's barely showed any sign of weakness. He's just been in the drops, looking proper solid. Get a good sight here of the final kilometre. It is pretty narrow, isn't it, Matt? As you come through town, you have the street bollards on either side, so you're going to have to be really attentive if you're fighting for the win here the next time around.
Yeah, definitely. The finishing straight opens up, as you can see here. We've had a couple of riders come to grief on that little bend, but both our two leading riders negotiated that one safely. And you can see the finish line up ahead, around 700 metres away. But as you said, Connor, that bit through town, it narrows considerably. Lots of different road surfaces, change from tarmac to cobblestones to small paving flags. So quite technical. And then it opens out again. So only 6 seconds. So the peloton have rounded that corner. As riders jettison bottles, lightening the load as we head into the final lap of this finishing circuit here. So good work being done by Alpecin de Koning, not only bringing the brake back, but making it hard for the remaining riders in this peloton. A real attritional race today, difficult weather conditions, undulating terrain, and what a great shot there. Vinabo takes a little look around. He knows his time is done. Not too sure which one is going to win the King of the Mountains. We haven't really been totting up the points, but one of these riders would definitely have taken that award. But their tenure at the front, they've been at the front for the vast majority of proceedings today, is about to be done and dusted. But I do doff my cap to both of the riders out in front, though, Vinabo and Mark Stewart and the rest of the break. They're narrowly in front with a lap to go, but the lead about to be snuffed out. 1 lap to go.
Looking like it's going to be a tough last lap as well. This break, we're coming back relatively early, you know, with 23-24k still to race. So there'll be plenty of riders now thinking that this could be their day, and you put in a few early attacks. It's going to be tough work for Alpecin de Koning and also Lotto Soudal to control this one. It looks like they are riding for their sprinters, Arnaud de Lee and Tim Merlier. Tim Merlier perhaps on a good day getting his riders to the fore here as they pass through the feed zone for the final time. But yeah, it's going to be a tough final lap to control, Matt, I think.
It is indeed. Well, it's that little steep climb that you were talking about. Vinabo just continues to ride. Stewart about to be retaken by the bunch. 2 many more metres until the Dane suffers the same fate. But yeah, this little bit of a climb just through the finish is arguably the steepest, isn't it, from what we can see here. And there are 3 significant climbs on the circuit before the Côte d'Ivoire. This small one, then there's another one after this, then it drops down again, then we take in the Côte d'Ivoire, and then we have that long descent down, that really fast section for the kick-up, and then the drop down, and then the kick-up to the line again. But for the first time since we have been on air, the peloton is as one. Nobody out in front, and the race essentially opened up again now. So it's down to Lotto Soudal and to Alpecin de Koning to try and control this. And interestingly, though, now Intermarché Want to Go there, doing the pacemaking before, have dropped back and are quite happy to leave it to the team in blue and red now.
Yeah, I think they'd be quite confident of Biniam Gramai, you know, getting over that final climb on the Côte d'Ivoire. I think he won't be put into any difficulty there. So I don't think they would have a reason particularly to get on the front here and control things. I think it's in their interest to let Lotto Soudal, you know, use some riders up controlling this one. It's going to be a tough ask because if the attacks do fly, they've already used up a number of riders already to try and keep this one together and to hit the steeper section of this climb. If any of those riders do get put into difficulty and are lost, then it's going to be quite a tough one for Arnaud de Lee to remain in contention if we do see some serious attacks on the Côte d'Ivoire. Dries de Bont, though, looking comfortable. He hasn't quite been riding on the front here. He's almost just been positioning himself in the top 10 riders, keeping himself out of trouble as we go back to the back of the peloton. And Mark Stewart, I think he'll ride in this last lap. Solid ride in the legs there, and brilliant ride in that breakaway up there with Vinabo to the end. Lotto Soudal. They still do have the numbers of around 6 riders there at the front, including Deli, so they do have the strength to continue riding this last lap. Roy Townsend also present. He's been doing a good job by himself just to keep himself out of trouble and follow any potential moves. We see a bit of an acceleration go on the left there, Matt.
Yep, looks like it is a rider from one of the continental teams that's gone clear. I think it's the Volker Vessel cycling team here. They've gone. That's a rider from Trek Segafredo coming over. It looks like it's Elko trying to get across the gap. Immediately marked by a rider from Alpecin de Koning as well. So the attacking starting to kick off on these series of climbs that lead us into the main climb of this finishing circuit. The climb that they got up the most today, that is the Côte de Roi. But also in number there as well, Lotto Soudal. A couple of splits starting to occur, so the racing really is on now.
Serious attack.
Yes, it was a serious move, and they continued that straight over the top. But the advantage of having all of your riders near the front is the fact that you've got numbers up in front when it splits as well. Also a rider there from Team Arkea Samsic in the mix as well.
I think that's Tom's Scoins, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt.
It is, I think you're right, yeah. It is Tom Scoins, yep.
Putting in a serious attack there. He's putting a lot of riders into difficulties. It's quite a steep gradient as you come through the finish and you hit this climb, and he's attacked at the perfect moment here. He's put a lot of riders under pressure. It looks like Connor Swift just doing a big attack there to try and jump across. As Dries de Bond.
Good move.
Yeah, good move there to get across.
Yep, there's a real strong acceleration. That was Dries de Bond just drifting back a little bit now. I'm used to seeing Tom Scoins in his Latvian champions kit, so apologies. But it is back together now. And Lotto Soudal again regain brief control. So into the final lap now of the Famenne Ardenne Classic. A couple of these riders have been jettisoned from the back. Some real stinging accelerations, fragmenting the group on this long drag. Another attack now from Trek Segafredo. This looks like Alex Kirsch is going clear now. So the tall, rangy rider from Luxembourg. So Trek Segafredo, I mean, they've got Ed Turns, but they're happy quite clearly to get in the mix and try and shuffle things around a bit. Again, once the race is completely back together again, the last thing you want to do is let these teams just take that control. And Dries de Bond, irrepressible as ever, trying to winch himself across the move as well.
Yeah, he jumped straight across to that one, Alpecin de Koning. They don't want to let a move go up the road here without being present, because it's just going to mean they're going to have to get on the front with Lotto Soudal and help chase. But this is what I was slightly worried about for Lotto Soudal, because they brought that breakaway back pretty early and they've got a whole lap here to try and control. And as we see, the attacks are starting to fly, so they've got a good 20k to, ride really hard and control things. It's going to be quite a tough ask. And then as they come onto the Côte de Roi, after jumping on all these moves when they're tired, it's going to be a serious challenge for them. Except for Mark, actually, Matt, as well, who's really present in that last attack there with Scoins. Jumped on that straight away, so he looks to be in good form and definitely one to consider in these closing stages.
Yep, certainly is. Good to see Sepp Van Mark up in the mix. A rider that won't be worried at all about these weather conditions. Still a reasonably sizable group, although we have lost quite a few. 19.8 Ks to go. Pace continuing to be set on the front by Lotto Soudal, who have still 6 riders in the mix. They started with 7. They've lost Sebastian Grignard, who did a lot of work early on. But they are trying to keep control of this group, and the rider on the front at the moment is Brent Van Moor. As I said, they've got a big job to do, but they've managed to sew things back together pretty quickly. And there are several riders from Trek Segafredo. They've got 4 or 5. I can see Ed Turns as well in there. And also on the left-hand side in the white, that is Valentin Ferron. And there is indeed Sepp Van Mark on the left-hand side. Tall, powerfully built rider. Just swings in and sits on the wheel of the Frenchman in the white. This is going to be an exciting finale. Could all kick off on the last descent of the Côte de Roi, which is coming in around 5 or 6 K's time, but still, it is Lotto Soudal. They've nailed their colours to the mast today, haven't they? They've taken this race up a long time ago, and they've got another 18 K's to try and keep control. Clearly, it's all about Arnaud Denis for me. That's what it looks like, but they've got to hold something back for this climb too, to make sure they can cover all the moves.
They do, and we see another attack here from Total Energies going straight off the front. That was a great move. As we approach the Côte d'Ivoire, that is going to be the serious test, I think, for them. They've got to keep things together on the climb after all this chasing, all this work, all day, covering these moves, and the likes of Anthony Turgis, who we see here going off the front. It's going to be a real challenge for them as we hit the climb, and if they do keep things together, I think Arnaud Delis is looking pretty good for the finish of this race.
He is indeed. Well, a good move by Anthony Turgis. Very, very classy rider indeed. Runner-up in the French national road race this year. Second in Milan-San Remo as well, so he's had a great season. He really, really has. He's a classy bike rider, but hasn't opened up too much of a gap. It's certainly making Lotto Soudal work for this one, and no other team is now doing the chasing. It's just up to one team. Even Alpecin de Koning have dropped away, but this is a good move by Anthony Turgis. He's a rider that can operate well from small moves, but has got a very, very good kick on him as well. But good riding here by Turgis. He checks the gap. This is looking good, and he looks to be pretty strong there. Nice puissance, looks to be turning the pedals pretty effectively. Backs off into this corner, and there we go. We're on to the final ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. Good little move here by Turgis.
Yeah, really good little move. He's obviously going strong, and this is, I think, what Lotto Soudal will be scared of. It's all well and good, you know, controlling things and following moves and getting the race together on the flat, but when these attacks go on the climb, if you haven't got the legs, you just haven't got the legs, and it's going to be a tough ask to keep this one together after all the work they've done. And I think now Anthony Turgis, he's riding well, but he's also, you know, a bit of a stepping stone for riders in the, and that's going to make Lotto Soudal's job even harder. But Turgis, he's building up a bit of a gap here. This is a solid one, and they're going to have to really keep tabs on it as we see a rider from Israel Premier Tech look to jump across to him.
Yeah, it looked like the Israel Premier Tech rider was actually riding on the front there, but he's actually opened up a little bit of a gap, turning huge gear, and is trying to get across. I think that's the Israeli rider. It looks like Omar Goldstein trying to get across the gap. Indeed it is Goldstein. It's a good climber, and that's a good little move. So the Israeli rider finds another gear out of the saddle, and this has really started to kick things off. So it looks as if Turgis is going to be caught, but this has provided a real catalyst. Remember, this is the final ascent of this climb. Turgis looks around, and he will see a little group that's just come across to him. Alice Kirsch is there. Connor Swift is also in the mix there as well.
Yeah, that was a serious attack by Goldstein. He's not finished yet either. He just digs on past Turgis. Number of riders really attentive to that attack. Connor Swift in particular doing well to position himself, as Alex Kirsch here goes for Trek Segafredo on the right-hand side of the road. So things are really hotting up in the peloton here, and you're going to have to be doing all you can to try and hang on to the wheels of these riders.
Yep. Alexander Kirsch takes a look over his shoulder, and there's a few splits starting to happen now. Goldstein swings across the road, looks for assistance. He can't shut the gap to the rider from Luxembourg, who lifts himself out of the saddle again, leans into this gear, but good riding here. It looks, in fact, if that's not Delis himself, certainly a rider from Lotto Soudal has managed to get back onto the wheel of Kirsch, who then swings across the road. And the rider there, I think from Intermarché, looks to be like a Loic of Liegen. And this is the damage that is being done behind. Riders really struggling to stay in contact in the closing stages of this race. So another attack on the right-hand side. It looks like it's Scoins again who goes. Trek Segafredo are determined to try and make things stick here, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really kind of 1-2 in the bunch here, aren't they? They're trying to get a rider away. They don't want it to come down to a sprint. It's really hanging in the balance here, the race, because the peloton is just staying together. The riders are attacking, but it's not quite, the elastic hasn't quite snapped behind. And I think the likes of Scoins now, they'll be looking to kind of really mix things up and take a group with them. They'll want things to split up behind. They'll want that chase and that control to go out to the bunch. And they'll want Lotto Soudal to be losing some riders, as we potentially see the likes of Victor Campenaerts here going into difficulty. So this is exactly what these attacks by Trek Segafredo will be trying to achieve.
Yep, good move here by Tom Scoins. It's not opened up too much of a gap. It's put a lot of riders under pressure. But what it has done, importantly, and depending on your point of view, of course, is that Lotto Soudal are now spread all over the road, but they do have a representation in this front group, sat in their position number 3 there. And I think that is, in fact, that is Delis. I thought it was Delis. He's so strong, is this young rider. 9 wins this season, the 20-year-old. Their protected rider, and is climbing exceptionally well. Just going over the top, but he's pretty isolated here though, Connor, and that's the last thing he needs. So he's clearly climbing well, has got very good legs, but he hasn't got any teammates with him.
No, he's having to do a bit of the work himself, which I think is what, you know, they'd have been trying to avoid with the likes of Campanar's going into difficulty there, and that's a teammate you'd probably be trying to rely on at this stage of the race. He's not quite got the legs to be there, so De Lee is having to cover these moves himself. He's obviously on a good day, so, you know, if he does slip away in one of these moves, it's going to be quite hard to beat in the finish. He's doing the right thing, but yeah, this is going to be a tough ride in the last 15 kilometres for De Lee to keep himself where he needs to be and not waste too much energy, as we see a few groups going off the back here.
Yeah, this is that was a Nicky Terpstra. I think this is either Dries van Gestel on at the front, or it is Perron. They've only got a few riders in this in the field. One of the smaller teams here, 5 riders from Total Energy. Cofidis represented in this front group as well. So there's a definite split here. We have around 20-25 riders who have managed to go clear over the top of this climb, and significantly you can see him there clear as day, and that is the Belgian road race champion Tim Merlier, just ensconced towards the back of that group. As we see another attack, it's from Scoins again, determined to try and go clear here.
He really is, isn't he? He's riding out of his skin, just being so aggressive, and I think Trek Segafredo, they've been waiting in the wings to fire these attacks up the road. Alex Kirsch and Tom Scoins, they're doing a cracking job here, trying to set the cat amongst the pigeons. Tim Merlier, he's just tucked into the back of that group, so he's doing well to remain in contention. So they haven't distanced the sprinters just yet, so Scoins is really going to have to persevere with these attacks and try and put those sprinters under pressure, because you're not going to want to bring the likes of Tim Merlier to the line at the end of this race.
One rider that I haven't seen is Benjamin Gramay. I haven't seen him at all, but that rider represented at the front here for Intermarché, about 6th or 7th wheel, is Loic Vliegen. He comes from this area, but I cannot... If you manage to spot Benjamin Gramay, because I haven't actually seen him in this group, as another attack goes on the right-hand side from Riwal, although it's neutralised. That is Nortoft. Morten Alling Nortoft tries to go clear. Left-hand side is Arkeas Samsic, being closed down by Israel Premier Tech, so no one till here. This is real bike racing. There's no real organisation at all now. This is very, very aggressive. It's all about a numbers game here, isn't it?
Yeah, this is just everyone just trying their luck now. That was Clement Rousseau, I believe, for Team Arkeas Samsic. So, you know, the split's gone in the bunch now. That's a sizable gap, and even behind that, you know, there's gaps. There's groups everywhere, really. So now's your chance. If you're feeling good, to go on the attack, and you can win this race from this scenario. This is what it's all about. I haven't seen Benjamin Gramay. I haven't seen him for a while now. It is tough to spot riders, though, when the weather does descend like this. Even when you're in the race, there's that element of... you know, you don't have the same communication, you don't have the same visibility, and it is a bit easier to hide. So I wouldn't discount him just yet, but no, personally, I haven't seen him in the action for a while.
No, you're right. That is Sepp van Mark at the back of that group. Sepp van Mark is at the back of group number 2. Now this looks like it's a teammate of De Lee. Again, the motorbike, understandably, just dropping off a little bit to give these riders plenty of space as they run into that corner. Sketchy times here in these wet conditions. And this is a big launch here. Just taking the advantage here. Alex Kirsch is the rider behind in the white of Trek Segafredo, trying to shut down this rider who's attacking off the front. Well, the group is starting to swell a little bit, so there's probably 30, maybe 40 riders in this front group, and we have 12.5 kilometres to go now.
Yeah, there is that chance to get back in, because it hasn't quite snapped. The gaps are there, but you can get back in on these descents. The problem is, if you get back in, it's too late and another attack's already gone up the road. So the likes of Trek Segafredo here, trying to keep those attacks moving, trying to keep the groups going away. Such a technical descent that even if you're in the back of the group, you're struggling. You see all the little gaps back down the line there. This is a really critical moment, and it's for the brave-hearted when the rain's descending like it is today.
It certainly is. They just briefly go under the motorway, as you can see, or under that little underpass, that little chicane, the shimmy left, then right underneath this technical part of this drop-off, the top of the Côte du Roi. And no one team dominating. Lotto Soudal had it pretty much all their own way until the last ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. This is Delhi. This is Delhi, happy to push things on the descent. Never really seen him do this before. He's absolutely flying, is Delhi. He's relatively isolated. I cannot spot another rider from Lotto Soudal in that front group. And bearing in mind the amount of riding they've done, no, he's not. There's no other riders from his side. There's one right at the back there. Two, in fact, because that little group, I think, with Victor Campenaerts has managed to sew itself together. But Delhi, seemingly, Connor, is happy to try and go on the offensive himself here, or at least make it difficult for everybody else.
Yeah, he's really riding out of his skin. I mean, he's almost taking the initiative, isn't he? And just going for it and trying not to be caught out by anyone and just putting himself in the front so that he's kind of saying, if you want to go, then you have to come across to me, and he's going to be there regardless. So real show of strength by him. I think it's almost better to ride like this, because when it's so lined out, as we see, if we look behind, I mean, you don't want to be caught out back there. You're just wasting so much energy, and the gaps are starting. It just takes one person to drop the wheel and you're done for. So it's almost better to stay at the front and keep yourself out of danger, as we see Alex Kirsch again, Frederic Segafredo forcing the pace of Delhi right on his wheel.
Yeah, well, Delhi, as you said, clearly got very, very good legs. Clearly rides well in these conditions. Sat on the wheel of Alex Kirsch, and then we're going to see an attack on the right-hand side. That's definitely the figure of Connor Swift, the former British road race champion for Arkea Samsic. But immediately on his wheel is Ed Turns. Ed Turns is there, also on the wheel. It looks as if it's Lawrence Nassen as well. And now we're looking at the figure there. Oh, a flat tyre, unfortunately, for Greg Van Avermaet. That is very, very unfortunate for the former Olympic road race champion. A critical time. And that is very, very disappointing for him.
Oh, you'd be gutted, wouldn't you? That's just the worst moment to have a puncture. 10k to go, and with groups all over the road, I mean, you're not getting back into the action. You're going to get back into a group, but it's too late, you know, to find your way back. And just like I said, a bit of trouble.
He couldn't even take his wheel out. That was neutral service. He didn't even have the Allen key to take his rear wheel out. That is bitterly disappointing for Van Avermaet. He was in that front group, was a relatively big front group, but I think with only 9.5 kilometres to go now, it is going to be difficult from the man from AG2R Citroën to get back in contact. But that's the very nature of racing, but never good to see. So we're now at the final 9 kilometres of this edition of the Famenne Ardenne Classic. Nine kilometres to go. A flick of the elbow there from Lionel Terminot of Belgium. One rider has managed to clip off, and that's a rider from Cofidis. Can't quite identify him just yet, but he's been brought back to heel pretty quickly. Ed Turns on the front here, bringing back the man from Cofidis. 8.8 Ks to go. No one team controlling things at all here. This is going to be a fascinating finale, but things have just lulled. So the group, Connor, has swelled a little bit, and I think there's some key men that have got back in contact now.
Yeah, definitely. The group has swelled, hasn't it? Things managed to come back together a little bit on that descent, but I'm almost watching this and I'm just waiting for one rider to put in a really decisive attack and get that gap. Because over these last few kilometres, we've just seen attack after attack, and I'm sure there's plenty of tired bodies in the peloton there, especially after things, you know, breaking and coming back together, and you see this lull. It's the perfect moment for an attack, so I'm just waiting really for someone to launch one.
I think you're right. I think you're... Yep, there's the first one on the right-hand side. It looks like it's Daniel Oss, actually. Yeah, Daniel Oss, the tall and a rangy rider from Total Energies. That's either Oss or Van Gestel, actually, the Belgian. But that little move hasn't snapped the elastic at all. All it's essentially doing right now is just bringing this group along, carrying this group, that racing momentum. In fact, at the back there, I think that is Anthony Telgi or Nicky Turks. So Total Energies have good representation. 7.7 kilometres to go now. And I'm wondering who the rider is from Bolton Equities. Is that Aaron Gate? Because so many riders here have their gilets still on their capes. Difficult to pick out the numbers, but it does look like it might be Aaron Gate in the mix there.
Yeah, that's Aaron Gate for sure. I can recognise his style. I've ridden with him enough times to know it's Gatey. So yeah, Commonwealth Games gold medalist this year, and he's still in the action. Solid sprint, so he's obviously riding well and he's marking these moves. So I think if you see Gatey get away in a little group here, he could definitely take the win.
but Sepp Van Mark goes over the top. So Van Mark goes, immediately brought to heel, but this should open things up for somebody else to go straight over the top. The Belgian swings over to the left-hand side. Nobody wanted to give a rider of such class any leeway at all, any sort of gap. He always remains a big, big threat. So briefly, hostilities have settled down. And remember, we've still got that long drag. It's about a 1,500-metre long drag. I can just see also a significant rider there for Arkea Samsic, Hugo Hofstetter. They've got such good sprinters, Arkea Samsic. Watch out for Capio and Hofstetter. Difficult to understand which will be the leader. I think in conditions like this, and given this selection, they might just have to agree between themselves and have a conversation, just get a sense of who's got good legs. And that's what, those conversations will happen at this point in the race, won't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think there'll be a plan made now with the riders they've got available to them, see who survived, who's feeling good, who's managed to get themselves in this front group here, and then it will be a case of deciding, you know, where we're going to place those resources, who we're going to ride for, if we're potentially going to let two riders, you know, go for the sprint. But hats off to Lotto Soudal. I mean, that was a really tricky moment in the race there. Deli had to cover a few moves himself, yet still he's managed to get two more teammates back up there to the front with him and control things. As we just hit this final drag up to the finish, we descend down into the town. We've seen it on each lap that this has been a really tricky point, and riders have been put under difficulties. Connor Swift moves up there with pace on the right-hand side.
Yep, Swift are looking good. Looking at Tim Merlier just on the inside there, slightly obscured. There he is, in that wonderful Belgian champions kit. He's looking good, and he's been riding very cagey. Hasn't followed any of these moves, and that is, you can just see Aaron Gate on the left-hand side moving up kindly. There he is, with the black overshoes, black helmet, and that fluo yellow kit with the blue sleeves, just emptying his nostrils there. So watch out for him. He is a potent threat. He really, really is. And there's an attack on the left, on the right-hand side from Tergis. Tergis goes up this big drag, winds up the gear, and has opened up daylight immediately. Takes a glance round, and the Frenchman is clear. Good move here by Tergis.
Yeah, another solid attack. We saw him go clear on the Côte d'Ivoire, and he did a similar move, but this is a much closer distance to the finish, so if this one pays off, it is a really serious attack. Good moment to go. Lotto Soudal, they've done well to get themselves to the front, but they're definitely starting to lack a bit of firepower. They're starting to lack a bit of energy, and these attacks are looking increasingly successful. They've been attacked all the way to the finish here. Stander Wolf, Rage Tour, just trying to get across these two riders at the front. It'll prove quite difficult to bring back, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. If you can get over the top of this drag, it then drops down. So Tergis, he's got a gap of just 3 or 4 seconds, 5 or 6 seconds maximum, as another attack goes on the right-hand side. This is another big move. Good attack there again. This is Goldstein again. So Goldstein's riding well. Attacked on the final ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire, and is gone straight past Stander Wolf. So Goldstein riding exceptionally strongly. But what he's doing for Lotto Soudal is giving them that little bit of a stepping stone. It's always nice to have somebody in the middle just to work towards. But Tergis glances around, centre of the road, out of the saddle again. It almost looks like he was starting to cramp up there. He really started to slow as we look at Sepp Van Mark. His face, well, it's a classic Belgian visage, isn't it? That is Belgian toothpaste, I think everybody's got in their mouths at the moment. It's good riding here by Goldstein, straight past the man from France. And Tergis struggling to get on. Well, it's an impressive ride by the Israeli rider here.
Yeah, he's riding really strongly, actually. Solid attack there. Brilliant move by him, Goldstein. And he just needs to do all he can now to try and stay away over the top of this climb, because we've seen it each lap. Descent down into town. It's quite technical, it's quite narrow. It's lined the peloton out on occasion, so if you can get into those few corners, that little part of the finishing part of this race, then you can definitely stand a chance of staying away.
Now this is Florian Vermeersch on the back. Of course, a runner-up in Paris-Roubaix previously, and on his in front of him, the winner of Paris-Roubaix in the form of Nicky Terpstra. Now these two riders are starting to move clear. This is very interesting. 4 kilometres to go, and a big attack on the right-hand side by one of the Sport Vlaanderen riders. Again, his number slightly obscured, can't ID him just yet, but under 4 kilometres to go. They're over the top of that long drag. Then they essentially go into a bowl, and it climbs up for the last kilometre. So a fast-moving bunch now. Goldstein still on the front, and tucked into his slipstream from front is Anthony Tielgi, but it does look like this might all come back together again here, Connor.
It's really hanging into the balance, isn't it? Lotto Soudal, they've lost the rider. There's no one quite chasing. It's just attacks flying. Arkea Samsic now trying to bring things together. As we said before, they have a few sprinters here. They have Hofstede. They have the likes of Connor Swift hanging in the balance map.
Just over 3 kilometres to go now in the Famenne Ardenne Classic. Classic Belgian weather, and we have two riders dangling off the front now in the closing kilometres of what has been an intriguing race so far. Omar Goldstein is the man in second position, but the man from Total Energy, the runner-up this year in Milan-San Remo, is Anthony Tielgi, but they only have a slender lead as the road starts to descend before it picks up again into the finish. We've still got to go through a very technical town centre in Marche in Famenne, but at the moment they are rocketing down this descent. A brief little bit of respite, and the two riders that were in front are about to be caught, and it is Arkea Samsic now shutting down the gaps, Connor.
Yeah, it looks like it's all coming together on this descent. There's going to be some nervous moments in this group as we go through town. Such a narrow little section as you descend down this bit, and then you go through the high street of the town, and yeah, everyone's trying to position themselves at the front here. It's going to be really key, because if you get caught out now, then you're really going to hamper your chances. Rory Townsend, Irish national champion, is still in the mixed edge on the right-hand side. We're out of our shot.
Well,
this is where we're just...
Sorry, great to see him in the mix. There he is, just on the inside there, clearly identifiable. That's a jersey you know very, very well. This is that technical section now, 1,700 metres to go. The road narrows, that pinch point through the roundabout, underneath the bridge, and then we go through the town centre with those different changing surfaces, go through the Flamme Rouge, then take a technical right, and then it's 700 metres, and they can see the line a long way off, and it is at the front. At the moment, it is Alex Kirsch. They'll be looking after Ed Turns, who is in that group. Arkea Samsic also riding hard. It looks like they might be protecting Amaury Capio at the moment. And also in the mix on the right-hand side there, coming through to the front, is Jasper de Boist looking after Arnaud Delis. Here's that little right-hander into the town. At the moment, it's advantage Lotto Soudal.
Yep, they've ridden a perfect race. They've managed to get things still together in this closing kilometre. I'm not sure how they've done that, because the attacks have been absolutely flying. Rider from Trek just gets caught out on the pavement there on the right. Edward Toons is up there. He's got the sprint. He can win this sort of race. Tim Merlier nicely positioned in around 6th or 7th wheel. Belgian national champion. He's right where he needs to be. He's hung on over these climbs. They've obviously changed tactics to work for Edward Toons, and that has helped keep things together. We see the crash go down. Oh.
I'm not too sure who that is. Straight back on the bike. That was very quick, almost cyclocross style. I'm not too sure which rider that was. Whether it was Arnaud Delis or one of his teammates. I can't tell from here. But Jasper de Boist is on the front. Well, I've never seen somebody crash and dismount with such elegance in my life. What a fascinating crash there. I'm not too sure who it was, but at the moment it is Arkea Samsic on the front. We've got 400 metres to go, and they're starting to wind things up for the sprint now. I think Lotto Soudal have actually lost their sprinter now, so Hugo Hofstetter is in the mix now, but winding things up on the front is Pierre Gotrat of AG2R. This is going to be a fascinating sprint. Couple of bits of bumping and barging there as Tim Merlier opens things up on the right-hand side. Connor Swift is in the centre here, and it's Ed Turns on the right-hand side. Who's going to take this one? It's difficult to see. Oh, this is going to be a fascinating sprint to the line. Looks like it is Arkea Samsic in the centre. Well, this is a drag shuttle on the right-hand side. Oh, it is. It looks like Zongler's going to take it. It looks like Axel Zongler took it on the right-hand side. At the very last, the man from Cofidis emerged from the melee to take the win. What an absolutely superb sprint that was by the Frenchman.
Oh my goodness, I need to recover myself after that. What a finish.
There was a lot going on there.
What a win by this man. That was some sprint to the end.
Indeed, Axel Zongler, was indeed the winner, but he came from nowhere but timed it to perfection. It was difficult to unpick that sprint. There was so much going on. It was almost, Connor, a sprint in slow motion, but this man quite clearly did it the quickest for his third win of the season.
Mighty impressive, mighty impressive. He kept a cool head there with all the attacks going, and it came together for him in the end. Axel Zonga, what a sprint. It looked like they all kind of misjudged where the finish line was. It looked like they all went kind of 100 metres too early, and everyone kind of started a sprint again at one point. I can't wait to see that one back, because that's one of the longest sprints I think I've ever seen in a bike race. Rory Townsend there as well. I think he was up there in the top 10, Irish national champion. Great ride by him. I think it was that crash there by Ardenne. I can't believe that, with that final corner, that last right-hander. He went down super hard, and I feel for the guy, because yeah, that was a tough one. He'd ridden a brilliant race, and that's bike race. It just doesn't work out sometimes.
Yep. Seeing a couple of riders come off on that corner, Dele will be bitterly disappointed. A pat on the shoulder there from his fellow countryman, Oliver Nelson. Well, let's have a look at this again. Just try and unpick this one. So you could write a book on what happened in this final kilometre. This is the right-hander. Just talk us through this.
Yeah, so this is the last right-hander, and it looks like he just goes into the saddle and tries to accelerate again. And we saw a crash here a few laps before. Just loses the back wheel, slips out, and he goes down, and his teammates, I don't think, even realised. So they kept on riding, and it was too late. There's no getting back from that. I mean, he jumps back on his bike quicker than I've ever seen anyone jump back on a bike before. Yeah. But it was too late. The sprint started. Edgewater went on the right. Arkea Samsic did a good job in the closing kilometres to try and keep things together. But Zongo, I mean, he's still quite far back at this stage. He's kind of 10th rider there. Merlier doing all he can to get out there with the solid shoulder barge on the right. And everyone appears to kind of start their sprint.
Was that Connor Swift on the right hand? It's difficult, or was it? No, I don't think it was. But like you see, Zong did a great ride. I mean, at this point, you couldn't see him from the aerial shot, but there he is, because he was right on the inside, totally boxed in, but it all unfurled just in the last 100 metres, even the last 75 metres of this race. Now, some acceleration by the Frenchman. In the end, I think he took it by nearly a length. Definitely, I think it might have been, it was difficult to see who was actually second there, whether it was Capio or Connor Swift, or maybe even Rousseau. They were very similar built riders. Well, a breathless finish to the Famenne Ardenne Classic. I hope you enjoyed that one. We certainly did. So this is the closing few metres, and on the right-hand side, the man from Kopia is actually sprinting on the hoods, which is pretty unusual. But it did it to devastating effect. In the end, I mean, it looked like he was doing it. He won it easily in the end, didn't he?
He did, didn't he? It looked like everyone kind of followed Merlier, and rightly so. I mean, he'd probably be the sprinter you'd look to in that scenario. And everyone kind of went on the rides, and everyone just kept getting blocked in. Merlier was blocked in, everyone was blocked in behind him. Zongo found the clear road on the left. And yeah, accelerated on the tops to brilliant effect to take the win. I think it was Oliver Narson in third place there for AG2R2.
Yeah, it was indeed Capio, Amaury Capio in third. Hofstetter also in the mix there for the men in red. But no doubt about the winner, Axel Zongo of Cofidis. They've had a good year, have Cofidis. They really have. Only fourth overall in the Arctic Race of Norway, as well as winning the opening stage, third in the French National Road Race Championships, and won earlier this year, back in April, La Route Adèle de Vitre. So he is a classy rider, and importantly has been consistent from the start of the season right the way through to the end as well. So there's a lovely view of Marche en Famenne from the air. We've had drizzly rain for the vast majority of the day, and interesting, I was doing a little bit of research about this town, Connor, and there's a folk dance troupe that do Walloon dancing that are known as La Pluvinette, which means fine drizzle in French.
There you go. I love it. I mean, they're obviously used to the fine drizzle around here.
They are indeed. It's the sort of rain, Connor, that wets you through.
It
does, doesn't it? And we've said it all race. It's so hard to ride a bike in it. So fair play to all the riders who've managed to race to great effect today, because it's not an easy task, especially when the cold starts to descend in this particular part of the world.
Indeed. Well, that's the Wallonie Expo. That's where the race started earlier on today. Started and finished, should I say, in Marche in Famenne. An entertaining race and a very, very exciting finale. Unfortunate for Ardenne, but a very technical. They were sprinting all on the right-hand side, weren't they? It just shows maybe where that little bit of wind was coming from. But Merlier looked to have a lot of momentum, but just on a couple of occasions was boxed in. I don't actually think anybody was at fault. He just opted for the side. There was just no space. And sometimes that happens in sprinting, doesn't it? Even though you've got good legs, if you're not in the right position and can't find the gaps, it's just the way it goes. But this was a fascinating sprint in slow motion. When the camera zooms out in a minute, we'll see how far back Axel Zongel was. And at the moment, he's actually on the wheel of the Belgian champion. And this is where he came, well, there's a bit of a shoulder barge there. Not really a barge, just a coming that almost came together. And look how boxed in Zongel is at the moment here as well, right on the inside. And from here, Connor, there's almost nowhere to go for Zongel.
No, he finds himself boxed in on the right too. It's almost like everyone kind of misjudges the finish and sees Merlier out the saddle sprinting and opens up. But Zongel does an absolutely brilliant job to thread his way through. He was on Merlier's wheel there on the right, and he just finds that little bit of space behind Hofstede to get through to the left and find the clear road. I have no idea how Merlier did not crash in this finish. He hit his wheels about 2 or 3 times with Kopia in front, and he manages to keep it upright. In the end, he kind of pulls himself out of the sprint, finishing in 6th or 7th position. But yeah, Zongel, I mean, he had brilliant leg, brilliant ride, but absolutely cracking job to thread his way through those final riders there.
Yeah, that was a very difficult last few 100 metres. Well, last 100 metres for Tim Merlier. Just kept going on the inside, and his back wheel went actually just they went over there too. He was just trying to accelerate through on the inside, and there wasn't any space. And just by his body language there, he couldn't get through on the inside. Capio was sprinting straight, maybe moved ever so slightly right, but there's nothing. He didn't exactly shut the door. There was just no space for Merlier to go through. And then, you know, when a rider gets frustrated, when they're angry with another rider, there's a lot of remonstration, but there was none of that, was there? He just got his line wrong, and there was just no space for him to move up.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was really in the wrong there. It was just kind of a racing scenario, to be honest. Merlier chose to go right. I think when you look at that replay and you look at when he decided to go right, it was almost a better option. There was equal parts to the road on right and left free. He went for it.